I'm glad we can heckle each other. That's good. So listen, it's like 10, 11 at night, my time. All right, so after being in Africa for 2 weeks, I don't know how this is going to go. All right, so we got back yesterday, and man, it was a blast. It was really good to work with 7 schools. We took some book sets into these 7 schools. And for those of you that don't know much about the Mathare Valley slum, it's a mile and a half long, tall, and a half mile wide. And there's about 850,000 people who live in that little section of property, of land. And so a lot of major issues, and it was so good to see the community that our church, Mountain View Christian Church, is partnered with, called Gitithuru. And literally it's about the same amount of land mass as Mountain View Christian Church's property, and there's 40,000 people who live in that little section. And so it's dense population, if you know what I mean, all right? There are a lot of people. And the average home is about the size, it's about 11 by 22. And that's the average home size. Maybe 8 by 12 might be average. And so it's not very big. And there's families of 3, 5, 8 who live in those little shanties. Now, here's what I want you to know, Mountain View. After being there for 2 weeks, you're making a difference. The partnership we have, those of you who are sponsoring children, man, you are making a difference. My first trip was 2010, and then second trip 2013, and then again this past week, and the difference you can see is amazing. And so you're doing great. We look forward to sharing those stories and talking more about our partnership and how that's worked out. So good job. Man, it was amazing to go and see the work that we're doing. So yeah. So anyway, long story short, it's bedtime. I should be putting on my pajamas and crawling into bed about now. And we'll see how it goes today, all right? And I'm watching all those who went to Africa. You better stay awake, Marissa, all right? You know, I'm watching. Good. So we're in this series called Family Matters, and I thought Pastor Craig did awesome addressing and talking to fathers last week. I watched via the live feed, which was a lot of fun, and so we're picking up on this conversation between parents and children today, all right? How many of you are parents? How many of you are children? Unless you were hatched, you should raise your hand because you're a child, all right? And so we're all children of someone, is that right? All right, so I guess if you're hatched, you'd be a child of a hen, wouldn't you? A chick of a hen? I don't know, never mind. I don't know. So, forget I said that, would you? There has never been a time in our culture, in our history, where such an emphasis has been put on the relationship with our parents. And the reason that this emphasis has been put on about our relationship is that if we can understand, if we can comprehend the relationship that we have with our parents, then we can understand ourselves, right? You with me? And so there's a tremendous amount of popular culture that has this emphasis on your relationship with your parents and your family background, and how you feel towards your parents, and how you are treated, so that if you can understand all that, then maybe you can understand why you do what you do, why you think like you think, why you are like the way you are. And so it makes sense. It makes sense that we would look at that. Makes sense that we would be concerned about those things, because next to the relationship that you have with God, it's the relationship with your parents that will have the most significant individual impact on your life. Isn't that fascinating? And when you really think about it, the parents lay the foundation. So as we look at scriptures and we understand this relationship, the importance of the relationship that we have with our parents and children, then we understand how important and how crucial it really is. And this is what I want you to know. The relationship between parents and children is complex. How many of you have a complex relationship with either your parents or your children or both? Yes. Right? Yes, double hands raised. I saw that. Yeah, that's good. But not only is it complex, but it changes, and it changes frequently. Hopefully, because first service I said this wrong, hopefully your parents treat you different now at an older age than when you were 1 month old. All right? And I say hopefully because I suddenly thought, maybe some parents are still trying to treat their 25-year-old like a 1-month-old. And you can't do that because change is essential. Change is necessary in that relationship between parents and children. That's what makes it so complex. And so the relationship between children and parents, it's complex and it's frequently changing. It's always changing, as a matter of fact. So we're going to look at a passage of Scripture, a very short passage of Scripture today that addresses both children and parents. And so if you need a Bible, raise your hand. We're going to be in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1, a very simple, a very short couple verses there that we're going to look at about this relationship between children and parents. All right? So turn to your Bible. I'll try to find mine. I'm not my Bible, but my verse here. There you go. Like I said, it's 10:17 at night on my body clock, all right? So Ephesians 6, are you there? Here, almost. Hurry up. I'm just messing, all right? Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1, it says this. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Verse 2. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. Verse 3, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Verse 4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and in the instruction of the Lord. 4 very simple verses that Paul uses to remind us about the relationship between parents and children. All right? So let's break this down. There's 2 commands that we see right away. And the first commandment is to children. And what is that command? Obey. Skip that one. Second command. Honor. All right? And I knew that would happen. And I'm going to address this word obey here in a moment. But I think with the word obey, it is very much written to be, to the Ephesian children, the young children. But like I said, we're all children, right? So for the sake of today's conversation, I want to address the thing that would bring all of us as children into the right place. And so I think that the command, obey your parents, is written specifically for younger children because, and again, I'm jumping ahead, but let's say, as I'm looking at all these scriptures and all these verses, doesn't the Bible also teach that a man should leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife? So let's say you're 45 years old and you're married and your parent says, we want you to move back into our house with us. Now, if that's you, you're crazy. But let's just say, so what do you do? What do you do? Do you obey your parents? Or do you do what the Bible has taught, that you leave your father and mother and cleave to your wife? You see what I'm saying? And so for today's conversation, as we look at this word obey, I think obedience is an important thing, but I think obedience is one of those commands that's specifically written to younger children. Obey your parents. And the second reason that I think this is because, and again, I'm jumping ahead, so forgive me, obedience flows out of honor, okay? And so honor is what I want to talk about today. Today, for children, no matter how old you are, no matter what your circumstances are, you need to honor your parents. It does not say, though, love your parents. Did you notice that? It doesn't say love your parents. It doesn't say trust your parents. It doesn't say admire and enjoy your parents, because we all know sometimes we don't enjoy them, right? And as a matter of fact, the 5th commandment out of the 10 commandments, which Paul is quoting here, it doesn't say obey your parents. It says honor your parents. Exodus 20, verse 12, which is where we get this 5th of the 10 commandments. It says honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. And so Paul's saying this is the first of the 10 commandments that involved a promise. There is a promise connected to it. And the promise is that you would live long in the land that God is giving you. So the 10 Commandments are these 10 principles that you can build your entire life on. That's why God gave them to the Israelites. And it's my belief that they are absolute principles, they are true principles, they are fundamental and foundational principles that apply to you in every stage of life, throughout every century of the world, in every decade, in every season. They always apply. And you can always come back to these 10 Commandments as basic, absolute, truthful principles that you can build your life on. And so I think that that's one of the reasons that God initially didn't tell the Israelites, obey your parents, because obedience can be circumstantial. And so in the Ten Commandments, he's saying honor because honor is not circumstantial. If God would have said, hey, I command you to love your parents. Well, love is this sense of affection for them. And we all know that we've been in situations with our parents where we don't feel very loving, don't feel very affectionate. Maybe your parents have upset you. Maybe they frustrated you. Maybe they did something foolish and you're thinking, for me to think about loving my parents right now, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. And so it would be impossible in certain situations to love your parents. Why? Because the truth is this: some parents are evil. All right? No amens. Hold tight. Especially if they're sitting next to you. All right? But some parents are evil. They really are. And it would not be right to feel affection like this for an evil parent. It just wouldn't. If God would have said, hey, trust your parents. When some parents are unstable, they're not trustworthy, and if you were to trust an unstable or an untrusting parent, then it would be foolish to trust them. And so the Bible, God didn't say trust them. He doesn't say admire your parents, because it would be impossible sometimes without denying the truth of some of the circumstances that you're in. And so when we look at this, and because the relationship between parents and children is so complex and it frequently changes, because there is a difference between a 5-year-old and a 50-year-old child, I think that the emphasis here is obey. Is honor, not obey. It's to honor. With me? Okay. Honor, what is it? Honor, no matter who you are, and no matter who your parents are, and no matter what your conditions are, no matter what your circumstances are, every child must, under all circumstances, honor their parents. You have to distinguish honor from all of these other things. You have to distinguish honor between love and affection and trust and obey and all these other words. You have to distinguish between the two of them. Otherwise, your conscience is absolutely going to kill you. And so what does it mean to honor? Honor is a moral choice, and it has nothing to do with your feelings. And you have to separate that moral truth from the feelings that you might have towards your parents. If not, you're going to go crazy. You're absolutely going to go crazy. Everything about your relationship with your parents, it's going to change, and it's always going to change. In every aspect of life, in every season of life, the relationship, the kind of relationship, and how you exercise that relationship with your parents, it's going to constantly change. But there is one thing that's always true, and it's this moral choice of honoring. It is. Because honoring has nothing to do with feelings, it has nothing to do with conditions, it has nothing to do with circumstances. Honor is a decision to treat your parents, to give your parents dignity, to treat them with courtesy, and to really give long-term loyalty toward their best interest. That's how I define honor. Honor is treating your parents, no matter the circumstances, no matter the conditions, with dignity, with respect, with courtesy, and always putting their best interests at your mind and heart. I know as we wrestle with this concept today that we get confused. All right? We get, because some of our relationships with our parents is not good. Some of us have parents who are not worth loving because they haven't been loving towards us. Some of us have relationships with our parents that are very controlling, very abusive, very manipulative. And so for you to begin thinking about obedience and loving and caring and respecting and admiring and all these other words, you're thinking, how do I honor my parents? And that's why I think that this word honor is the word that we need to focus on, because it's a moral choice. It has nothing to do with our conditions. It has nothing to do with our circumstances. It has to do with a moral choice of honoring. Some say this: if I honor my parents, then I'll have to come back under their authority, and I can't listen to them because they are manipulative, they are controlling, they are abusive, and so I can't honor them. And what I'm saying to you is you don't have to listen to them. It actually might be best if you don't listen to them. Because maybe they are controlling. Maybe they are abusive. You don't have to approve of them. You don't have to have them approve of you. That's not what we're talking about. You don't have to confide in them and share your deepest, darkest secrets with them. You don't have to listen to what they say. And yet, I think the command here is honor them still. No matter what the circumstances are, you can treat them with dignity. You can treat your parents with respect. You can give them a little bit of courtesy, and you can always live your life with their best interest in mind. You can still show this type of loyalty without all of these other things, and you have to separate those. Young children get it messed up too. As a youth pastor, I would have children and teenagers who would come to my office, and they'd say, listen, I'm doing everything that they tell me to do. I'm obeying them, all right? But I don't have to treat them nice. I don't have to treat them with respect. I don't have to do what they tell me to, this whole attitude, right? And so they focus on obedience. And I'm saying, you got it backwards. The command here is honor. Honor your parents. No matter what season of life, no matter what the conditions are, honor them. Obedience will flow out of honor. But honor is fundamental. It's key. It's most important. Young people miss it. If they think, I just obey my parents, but I'm going to come home and treat them like trash, you've missed the point. If you do everything your parents tell you to do, yet they don't show you dignity or courtesy or some level of respect, then they've missed what Paul's talking about here. There's a command for parents also. And the command for parents is this: bring them up. Bring them up. There's a negative and there's really a positive command here in verse 4. It says this: fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and in the instruction of the Lord. Here's what Paul's saying. You get to make the choice, parents. Are you going to have the positive effect or the negative effect? If you bring them up, then you won't provoke them. If you don't bring them up, what are you going to do? You're going to provoke them. If you provoke them, then you're not bringing them up. And so really he's saying you have a choice here. What are you going to do? Are you going to have the positive choice or the negative choice? Are you going to be intentional and bring them up, or are you going to be negative in the negative choice, and are you going to provoke them? He's kind of saying, listen, they're both going to happen. You just get to choose which one you want to happen. Are you going to be intentional with the children that are under your care? Are you going to raise them up? Are you going to bring them up? Are you going to do some things on purpose with them? Or are you going to be passive and off to the side? Because if you're passive and off to the side, you know what's going to happen? You're going to provoke. Now, if you intentionally provoke, then you're missing the command of bringing them up. And so Paul is saying here, bring them up. If you don't bring them up, by the way, that's what parenting is all about. If you don't bring them up, then you will have a negative effect. So you have to be intentional. You have to be purposeful. You have to bring them up. One of the things that I would challenge you to do, especially if you have young children in your home, if you're a parent of young children, you need to sit down with your spouse and you need to talk about what kind of attributes do we want our child to have when they turn into a teenager or when they leave the home? What type of character do we want them to have? What do we want them to think about work, and what kind of work ethic do we want them to have? How do we want them to treat males or females? What do we want their dating relationships to be like? What do we want them to think about our family and in our home? And you know what? If you don't sit down and if you don't talk about it, if you don't have those goals, then you're not intentionally bringing them up. But if you do create a list of those desires, those goals, those dreams that you have for your children, then guess what? You might actually do some things on purpose to develop those traits, to develop those attributes, to develop that type of character in their life. And so be purposeful. Be intentional. Make sure that you're always teaching, always instructing, always being purposeful about raising up your kids. And I know that we live in a culture, we live in a society where some of this stuff just happens on accident because it's just so busy. But again, next to our relationship with God, the most important relationship that we have on this earth is the relationship between parents and children. don't you think we should do it on purpose? If we don't do it on purpose, then we're going to be provoking. That's exactly what Paul's talking about here. So the two commands, the command to children is what? To honor. And the command to parents is what? To bring them up. Why? Why? You know, a lot of times we have this argument and this conversation in the church about why, or even society has this conversation. The church, it's this flesh and blood conversation. Well, because they're my children, they're made of my flesh and made of my blood, and so here we go. Well, the world says, I brought the child into the world and I can take him out, right? I think it's incomplete. I think we're missing it. The other argument is this: well, parents are wiser than their children. And so, you know, that's why. Because parents are smarter, they're wiser, they know what to do, they've got experience. But listen, I know a lot of wise parents who have blown it with their children. And so that's incomplete. What does Paul say? Paul says in verse 1, children, obey your parents in the Lord. Why? For this is right. Honor your father and mother. Why? So that it will go well with you. I mean, it's almost frustrating because Paul is so simplistic here. He's saying, why should you honor your parents? Because it's right. It's the right thing to do. Why should you honor your parents? Because it'll go well with you. Think about people in your life, those who have honor and dignity and respect towards their parents, and those who don't. Don't? All right? Those who don't. Can you see a difference? This is a general rule. It's not always specific. But do you know those children who have got honor and dignity and respect towards their parents and those who don't? How's life going for those who do? And how is life going for those who don't? Again, this is a general rule. Not always, but a general rule. He's saying, listen, it's right. It doesn't matter if they're blood and flesh of you. It doesn't matter if you're wiser than them. He's saying, why should you honor your parents? And parents, why should you bring up your children? Because it is right. How? How do we do this? Especially, how do we do this when we have family relationships or we have relationship with our parents that isn't good? How do we do it when our parents have not been good with us? Or didn't do some things on purpose and instead provoked us? What do we do? How do we honor? Especially when we have all these different circumstances and conditions. Let me give you a few suggestions. Number one is this. Find culturally appropriate ways. What I mean by that is this. Birthdays, Father's Day, Mother's Day, a Christmas card. I mean, those are appropriate, culture-appropriate ways for you to show honor to your parents. Maybe you're having a hard time loving them. Maybe you don't necessarily, trust them. Maybe you don't admire them. And maybe you've confused these two. You don't have to confuse them. What I'm saying is honor in culturally appropriate ways. On their birthday, send them a birthday card. That's honor. Write them a card at Christmas. Buy them a small gift. It's honor. On those holidays that we set aside for our parents, show them honor. Just say, hey, happy Mother's Day, happy Father's Day. It's simple, but it can still show honor. It can still show dignity. It could still show respect. Number two is this. Respect your parents' need to see themselves in you. This one's interesting because I surveyed a bunch of people before this sermon series, and I said, hey, tell me what you need to hear. Talk to me about this stuff. And one of the things that I heard, especially from those who are parents of grown children, is sometimes they want to give advice and it's not received very well. Their children think, I don't need to know from you. I don't need to know what you think about this. Just back off, right? But you know what parents of grown children are often looking for? They want to see themselves in you. They want to hear you say, Dad, you used to drive me crazy when you said this, but guess what I say all the time now? You know? Your parents want to hear that. Your parents want to hear from you. They want to see themselves in you. They want to be able to look at you and say, you got that from me. I pity our children because they seem to have gotten all my bad traits and Sarah's good traits, you know what I mean? And so Sarah, when Tucker behaves like me, says, well, your son. And I think, that's my boy. That's my boy. Makes me proud, you know? His little OCD tendencies. Right on, Tucker. Right on, you know? But isn't that what most parents want? Don't we want to see ourselves in our children? I mean, young, old, grown child. I mean, who knows what circumstance you're in? Don't you want to see yourselves in your kids? And so do your parents. Your parents want to see themselves in you. And that's a way that you can show them honor, remind them, tell them, you know what, I got this trait from you. Or I say this all the time and I swore I never would, but because you said it all the time, now I'm saying it all the time. I mean, that's a simple way that we can show honor. The third way is this. Forgive them. Forgive them. I'm not saying forget about the things, good or bad. I'm saying forgive them. I'm a parent. I've been a parent for a little over 6 years. You want to know how many times I've blown it? A lot. A lot. Some parents blow it more than other parents. I mean, really they do. But one of the easiest and one of the best ways to honor your parents is to be able to forgive them. The relationship between your parents and you, it is a very clear picture of the relationship that you have between you and God. And so being able to forgive them is one of the greatest things you can do. A lot of you know some of my story. My mom and dad got married. They got pregnant with me. And they were both in high school. And they chose to keep me around, but my mom and dad, they quit high school. They got married and they started a life together, and out comes me into the world. Dad was 17, Mom was almost 17 when I was born. And so they were young. They were young. Dad went and worked in the oil field, and Mom did odd end things. Dad eventually turned to drugs, turned to alcohol, and was very physically abusive towards my mom. Then became abusive towards me. Where eventually my mom and dad, they divorced in 89 when I was 9 years old. Dad moved to Montana. Mom moved to Oklahoma. She remarried. We stayed with my grandparents, and I can tell you from that point, I started to gather bitterness and hurt and anger. I was frustrated. I watched him beat my mom. I felt him beat me, you know. And so you've got all these memories and all these hurts and all this pain and all this frustration, all this disappointment. All of a sudden you're frustrated because you're not a normal family like everybody else in the world. Eventually we moved to Oklahoma. I was behind in school. I was trying to make up. I was trying to figure things out. And I was even more angry because if they just left everything alone, and if Dad hadn't have turned to these other things, and Mom and Dad would have still been married, and, you know, what if, which only creates more anger, more bitterness, more hurt, more pain, more frustration, more disappointment. But I remember I was in Bible college. I remember the time, I can remember the week, that I actually found me in a place where I thought, I've got to forgive him. I've got to forgive him. He didn't care if I forgave him or not. The Bible didn't say that I have to love him, I have to obey him, I have to admire him and look up toward him because I didn't, and I wouldn't. But the Bible again is teaching us that I need to honor. And I'll tell you, the unforgiveness was creating self-assurance issues, self-esteem issues. It was creating intimacy issues. It was making me lonely. It was making me confused about family structures. I didn't think I mattered because I didn't have a mom and dad family. It was bringing all sorts of issues. So as 18 years old, I remember coming to a place and saying, I've got to forgive him. I don't have to love him. I don't have to follow in his footsteps. I don't have to admire him. I don't have to, say, hey, it's the greatest dad in the world, because it wasn't true. I didn't have to trust him because most of everything that came out of his mouth ended up being a lie. But I needed to forgive him. And as I began to forgive him, as I began to understand what forgiveness looked like, I began to understand even more the relationship between my father. Here's the thing. Some of us, all of us, I believe, are pursuing this family love. And it's a love, it's a perfect love. It's a love that's given no matter what you've done, no matter what the circumstances. It's unconditional. It doesn't have anything attached to it. And all of us are longing and we're looking and we desire so deeply to have this family love that is so meaningful to us. And some of us will go crazy searching for it and looking for it and trying to find it because maybe it didn't exist in our families. But this is what I want you to know. If you're searching, if you're looking, if you want that so badly, there's really one true, perfect place you can find it. And that is with the Father. Maybe your earthly parents have blown it. Maybe they've messed up. Maybe they have totally trashed their opportunity to bring you up. Maybe they've hurt you. Maybe they've created all sorts of pain in your life. And maybe you are searching for that family, unconditional, awesome, no matter what the circumstances is, type of love. And there's only one place that you can find that love, and it's with the Father. And I'm telling you, if you can come to a place where you can forgive your parents for their mistakes, then you will know that love in such an incredible way, it'll blow your mind. And then you can stop looking for it in all the wrong places. You can stop pursuing it and looking for it everywhere else. No matter what, we've got to seek and we've got to find that love with God, the Father. And maybe you want to know how. And I'm telling you today, I'll be out in the foyer. You can ask. We can talk about it. Okay? But until then, this is what I'm challenging you with. There's 2 commands. Children, honor your parents. No matter the circumstances, no matter the conditions, no matter what the past looks like, you can do it. Why? Because it's right. Parents, bring your children up on purpose, with purpose. Why? Because it is right. It is right. How? Find simple, appropriate ways that you can honor your parents. Say thanks for giving birth to me on their birthdays. Say, hey, thanks for being a mom, or thanks for being a dad on those special holidays we call Mother's Day and Father's Day. At Christmas, don't forget to say, hey, just want to wish you a Merry Christmas. Let them see themselves in you. Be vulnerable enough to let them see themselves in you. And under all circumstances, no matter what, forgive them. If you can forgive them, then you will be able to experience that family love that we all long for, that we all want. Let's pray. God, thanks for today. Thanks for your word, and thanks for the challenge to love. To love you, to search for love from you, to remind us, God, that perfect, that awesome, that unconditional, that incredible love that we all long for can be found solely in you. God, thanks for reminding us to honor our parents. No matter what, to make the moral choice to honor our parents because it's right. God, thanks today for reminding us, if we're parents in the room, to be purposeful, to raise up our children, to bring them up, to grow them up, to do it on purpose. Otherwise, we're only going to have some negative effect on them. And so, God, would you help us? Would you help us as parents? Will you give us strength? Will you give us courage? Will you give us wisdom? Would you give us the ability to know how to bring them up? God, help us forgive. Help us forgive our parents when they blow it, when they did blow it. Help our children forgive us when we blow it. And God, thank you. Thank you for forgiving all of us as children, your children. Thank you for always extending grace, always saying that we're forgiven. Thanks for proving it by sending Jesus to the cross. God, just help us. Help us focus on that relationship between parents and children. God, help us focus on the things that really matter in that relationship. God, I love you and I thank you so much for giving us the ability to be here today. Will you just continue to teach us? In Jesus' name, amen.